Hey guys, welcome back to Jace Love Strength. We've been hearing a lot of talk lately that Rayno Nel's 52 points is the most ever by someone who did not wind up winning the world's strongest man. And I thought, rather than taking people's word for it, we should probably look at the data and see how factual that is. I thought it'd be fun to do. So let's do it. We're going to dive in and take a look at Rayno Nel's 52-point performance, find out if it really is the most ever for someone that didn't win. And we'll also take a look at some other standout performances for those that did not manage to eke out a victory. And we'll just take a walk down memory lane of the sport, shall we? So without further ado, let me go ahead and bring up the spreadsheet. All right. So we're going to start out by showing right here is Rayno Nel scored 52 points. And the way that I set this spreadsheet up is it shows how many points the second place person had, and then next to that is their margin of loss, so how much they trailed by. Then after that, we've got a number of events in the competition, and then who ultimately won, as well as some notes that I took down that I wanted to address in the video. And I did that as the way to make notes and did some color coding here because there's more performances that I want to draw out than just Rayno's, but I didn't really want to go through 49 years of history of at the world's strongest man because that would have made this video painstakingly long. I probably would have been hoarse. Now, on the flip side of that, if you guys would have watched the entire thing, that would be great for my watch time analytics. But I thought we should just talk about some performances rather than every performance. So I'm going to call attention to the ones that I think deserve the most attention. Also, you'll notice that events is in quotes here, and the reason for that is because the last couple of years we've switched to using the system where we use the preliminary qualifying round total as an event, essentially to see who gets seeded with some points to start the final. It's not really an event, but it winds up giving you 6 scoring criteria, so I counted it as an event, and so I decided that we would take a look at those things. So what we can see right here is the first thing is that Rayno Nel's got 52 points. You can see as you look through these, the brief history of where we've only had 6 events or less into the final, and you can see that 52 is a very, very, very big and very, very good number. We can also see, though, that it is not the single most points that anyone has ever had in a 6-man or in a 6-event final. That actually goes to Hafthor Julius Bjornsson. We can see right here that Hafthor winds up having the most points ever for someone that did not win when he finished second to Zydrunas in 2014. Hafthor managed to get a whopping 63.5 points in that contest. Now, it's not exactly apples to apples, and that's exactly why I made these notes. So when Rayno finished with 52 points to Mitchell Hooper, that was in a 10-man field. You can see in 2014 that was a 12-man field, so each round was worth a lot more points. So you can decide. I'm not going to tell you how to think. You can decide who's more impressive and which performance is more impressive. 63.5 second place finish in a 12-man field, or a second place 52-point finish in a 10-man field. Both were done over the course of 6 scoring events. So there you go. The next thing I wanted to point out was also going to give some more shine to Hafthor here. You'll notice that in a 6-man field, or in a 6-event 10-man field, the same exact that Rayno Nel just did, he didn't manage to best Rayno Nel's 52 points. He got 50 and 51, but that was back-to-back performances of 50 points and not winning it. So in 2016, Hafthor finished with 51 points. That was 2 behind the winner, same exact number of points behind that. The margin difference is the same as what Rayno and Mitchell just had, and that was a 2-point loss to Brian Shaw. And then in 2017, Hafthor finished with 50 points, which was only 1 behind Eddie Hall. All right, the next thing I wanted to call attention to on this was if we look back to 2010, we can see that Brian Shaw, another 6-event performance here, 51.5 points. So up until Rayno got 52 in 2026, 51.5 was the most points that anyone had ever had in a 6-event 10-man final. So So Rayno did manage to break the record for most points for a second place person in only a 6-event final in a 10-man field. That was previously held by Brian Shaw, 51.5. So now that belongs to Rayno Nel by an extra half a point. But the other thing I want to talk about this is 2010 was really, really crazy because you can see that Brian Shaw finished second place to Zydrunas Savickas. But you can also see that they had the exact same number of points. So Brian Shaw and Zydrunas actually tied with 51.5. The reason that Zydrunas beat Brian was they went on countback. And the way the countback worked is they looked at who had the most event wins. And Big Z and Brian both had 2.5 event wins. They each won 2, and then they shared a share of first place on another event. So they each had 2.5 wins. But then Big Z also managed to have a second place victory, and Brian's best performance, other than his win shares, was a third place. So that meant the title went to Zydrunas, even though they had the same number of points. All right. After that, or prior to that, I guess you could say, we were mainly looking at 7-event finals. Okay, and so you could say that the best performance there through 7 events was actually belonging to Mariusz Pudzianowski. He managed a 57.5 point second place finish, losing the title by 3.5 points to Phil Pfister. And then we can also see that Zydrunas Savickas finishing with 36 points, the lowest number that you're going to see on here, and set the lower even than Mateusz is 38 here, to Martins in 2019. Now, granted, Martins and Mateusz only had a 5-event final, so there was not a whole lot of events there. Here in Zydrunas' case, only 36 points, second place in an 8-event final. So Vasil Verestuk actually won an 8-event final with only 37 points. Now, we have to also call attention to the fact that there were only 6 men competing. So there was not a whole lot of opportunities to pick up major points, as the most an event win could get you would be 6 points. I do think it's worth pointing out, though, and it's interesting to know that Vasil Verestuk, with an 8-event final, managed to win the thing with only 37 points. So after that, the next performance that I want to call out is Jouko Hola. 1998, the year I graduated high school. Man, do I feel old. He finished second to Magnus Samuelsson in an 8-event final. Jouko didn't win, but he managed to score 67 points. Pretty darn good. Now, again, that's through 8 events, though, right? Eric Badenhorst had another 60-plus point performance in an 8-event final, finishing second to Magnus Magnusson with 62.5 points in 1995. The next 62.5 point performance that we got to call out is Magnus Magnusson in 1992, finishing with 62 points, only one behind Ted Vanderpar. Now, there's something else to mention in this one, though, because as you can see here, in this event, we had an 8-event final. In this event, though, Magnus and Jamie Reeves actually tied with 62 points. So we didn't have a tie for first like we did with Shaw and Big Z earlier, but we did have a tie points-wise in second place. We had Magnus and Jamie Reeves finish with 62. But Magnus actually takes the second place because he had several event wins, and Jamie Reeves did not have any event wins. So Magnus was the second place winner. After that, the next thing that I wanted to talk about goes back to the early days of strongman. And in this case, we're going to talk about Tom McGee finishing with 78 points for second place. Jeff Capes. Now, this is, in case you're wondering, the real who had the most points ever for someone that didn't win. The answer is Jeff Capes. In 1981, he had 88 points and did not win. He had to finish for second. And then Lars Hedlund with 74. So you can see these are all big numbers, 78, 88, 74 for second place here. And you can also see that in this case, in 1980, 74 meant that Lars Hedlund lost to Bill Kazmaier by 28.5 points, which is the largest margin of victory ever in World's Strongest Man. The second best is 20 points when Mariusz Pudzianowski beat Zydrunas Savickas back in 2003. That wasn't in a 7-event final, and so that may be the most dominating performance in all time because that was only 7 events. Down here, yes, my man, my hero, my all-time favorite strongman, Bill Kazmaier does have the biggest victory margin of victory of all time at 28.5 points. Um, but that was through 10 events. The other thing that I wanted to point out, though, here was in addition to that, uh, Bill Kazmaier in 1982, he had 91 points. That was the third highest point total in competition ever. In 1981, the year prior, he had 96 points. That was the second highest point total in competition ever. And in 1980, when he had the largest point differential ever, he had 102.5 points, which is the highest point total ever scored in the World's Strongest Man. Now that we gave him all of his prop and all his shine, to keep things transparent and honest, we also have to point out that this was back in days when they had a lot of events. So there weren't qualifiers back in those days. Instead, you just had a bunch of events. So in 80, that was a 10 event. That was a 10. It says final, but really there was no qualifiers, I don't believe. I don't remember there being any. So it was 10 events, and then in 81, when he got 96, it was 11 events, and then in 82, when he three-peated, and they said, hey, we're not going to invite this guy back again, it was 10 events when he picked up his 91. The only other thing I guess worth pointing out here, and then I'll probably wax poetic for a bit before I get off here, is I said that the second biggest point differential of all time was Zydrunas finishing 20 points behind Mariusz Pudzianowski in 2003. And that's correct, but it's not only him. You can see that Bob Young did the same exact thing in the very first World's Strongest Man in 1977. He finished 20 points behind Bruce Wilhelm. But much like Kaz's 10 and 11 events, the same kind of thing was here. Bruce Wilhelm did manage to win by a massive 20 points, but it was 10 events. So, the biggest point differential ever in a 10 event competition is 28.5 by Bill Kazmaier, which also happens to be the biggest point differential of all time. So there you go. All right. So anyway, what does this really mean? Well, what it really means is that Rayno Nel did not have the most points ever for someone that did not win the competition. That's been the narrative that people have been running with lately. That's not technically true. It is true if we say that Rayno Nel had the most points ever for someone who didn't win in a 6-event final. Then it's true. Prior to that, it would have been 51.5 points for Brian Shaw back in 2010 when he tied points with Zydrunas Savickas. So whether it's the most or not, I think you could definitely make the case that it's Rayno turned in one of the most dominating performances ever for someone who didn't win. And I think in terms of a close battle, I think you've got very few performances that you can look at right now. So in terms of the closest, toughest battles of all time, you could make an argument that what we just witnessed was one of those. You could say that Rayno Nel and Mitch Hooper just had the best contest of all time, the biggest battle of all time. That would be defensible. I think the tie there, or I think the ultimate best battle in history has to go to 2010 with Brian Shaw and Big Z because they tied, and even in countback, they were tied with victories at 2.5 wins apiece. You had to look very, very, very deep into that contest to find something to differentiate those two. So I think that was actually the best battle in the history of strongman. So if you wanted to say that Rayno and Hooper are second best, you'd have an argument to make, I believe. The only other contest that I think that you could really put up in there is you could say that when another Big Z contest, you could say the Big Z Brian battle may have been the best of all time. If not, maybe you look at 2014 when Half Thor finished only a half a point behind Big Z, and that was in a 12-man final. So again, there's a lot more that can happen, a lot more differentiators that can take place when you've got more men competing. The fact that they were only separated by half a point in a 12-man field is really bonkers. So I mean that was quite a battle. And then Half Thor finds himself in the discussion with a couple others because you can see that he had the only other two 50-point performances in a 6-event final, coming in second place in both of those to Brian Shaw and Eddie Hall respectively at only 1 and 2 points behind. So you got there. And then the last one that you could mention would have been last year when Tom Stoltman finished second to Rayno. So you could say that the battle between Mitch and Rayno this year may have been the best. But that would be some recency bias because we saw quite a battle last year between Rayno and Tom, and really Mitch too, because Mitch was in the third. So, uh, so I don't know. I'm not willing to go out there and say it was the best of all time. I actually think the biggest, toughest, closest battle in history was 2010 Brian Shaw and Big Z. But you can't take any shine away from what entertainment value and this true spirit of competition that Rayno and Hooper just turned in. That was an amazing battle, right down to the final stone, not to the final event, to the final stone, and had us on the edge of our seats the entire time. It was a hellacious battle, and I don't know about you guys, but I am looking forward to seeing what happens next year because I predict that Rayno has to be heartbroken. He has to be absolutely destroyed that he came out 2 points behind Mitchell Hooper after leading the competition round by round by round in the finals. And then to drop that fourth stone there and that be the difference maker, he has to feel gutted. And I suspect that if he didn't train as hard as possible, he might have felt like he trained as hard as he possibly could for the 2026. I think he's going to find another gear. I think he's going to train. I don't know, with just crazy, crazy passion because he's not going to be able to handle this heartbreak a second time, and he's going to want to go there and prove a point next year. And so I think Mitchell Hooper needs to be ready for that. And I think Tom Stoltman didn't make the final this year. I don't think that's going to set very well with him, especially considering that Tom is a three-time winner, but he's also finished second 3 times. You can see right here. People talk about what Tom's done and people rating him out and stuff like that. But not only is Tom a 3-time winner, he's finished second 3 times too. So the fact that he didn't even make the final, I don't think that's going to set well with Big Tom. And I predict he's probably going to come back like a bat out of hell next year as well. Now you can make a point. A lot of people say that Tom is mentally weak, or they'll say that he whether they talk about autism or they don't talk about autism, a lot of people will say, Tom settles or has difficulties with confidence and self belief, and if he gets frustrated or disappointed, sometimes he doesn't have the mental toughness to fire back. I'm not telling anyone how to feel about any of those things. What I will say is that we'll see in the next 365 days if Tom seems to wilt under this pressure, or if he comes back destined to shut up the naysayers and say, I told you guys that 2026 does not represent me. I told you to suspect more of me, and now you're looking at a 4-time world's strongest man. I think that's going to be Tom's drive and goal for this next year. I don't know that he'll reach that goal. I don't know that he will come back and make the final. I don't know that he'll come back and make the podium in 2027. I don't know that he'll win it. But I think that we shouldn't count him out, and I think that it's possible because I think that he is going to have a chip on his shoulder and he's going to have something to prove not only to everyone else, but probably to prove to himself. And so I expect big things from Tom Stoltman, and we'll know. We'll see by the way he trains how the competitions look for him coming up, going forward. But all I can really tell you is we were treated to something special in 2026 at the World's Strongest Man. And I think that from now through this time next year, we're going to be treated to a lot more stuff that looks very, very special in strongman, because this is a super exciting time to be a strongman fan. And I can't wait to watch it with you guys. Leave me comments. Let me know where you rank Rayno Nel and Mitchell Hooper's battle all time. Let me know which of these results that you saw in the historical spreadsheet was most surprising to you. And tell me if you're a fan of Big Kazmaier and if any of you guys watched him, so that I don't feel like I'm the only old guy around. All right. I'll see you guys in the next one.